Hello, welcome to Talking Heads. You join us here in our Peterborough office. We've got Steve Rose, publisher of BikeSocial, myself, Michael Mann, and you are with us audio and visually as well. So we've got cameras and we've got this podcast here. So this is Talking Heads. It's all about chatting with members of the motorcycle community. And in this episode, we have the wonderful Gary Hartshorne with us. Hello, Gary.
Good morning.
So Gary's a senior product manager for motorcycling for Bridgestone. We could call you the rubber man, couldn't we?
I've been called worse.
So in this episode, we'll start with sort of a getting to know you section, Gary. We'll talk a bit about you and how you got to where you are and who the next Gary Hartshorne will be and how they can get to where you are.
Oh,
and a bit about your riding, a bit about tyres, well, a lot about tyres, hopefully.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for, I think, 34 years now. Since I was a lad, really. I'm an electrician or electrical engineer by trade. Got made redundant and sort of fell into this industry. I was always a rider of motorcycles. My dad's, he used to march up at Dollymore and stuff with my dad and his mates and all that sort of stuff. Fell into this. I went out one day on my bike after I'd been made redundant in the early 90s recession and bumped into a friend of my friend who worked in the Pirelli race service. So I told him my situation. So we'll let you know if there's anything going. Literally a few weeks later, do you want to come to the Manx Grand Prix? And just balance wheels and all that sort of stuff. And I said, yeah, can do, got nothing else to do. So I went there and did that. And then about a couple of months later, I got another phone call saying, do you want to come and work on the race service at BSB? Yeah, why not? So a total sort of piece of luck, really. Sliding doors, you know, when one door closes, the other one opens, and I'd gone from losing my job and losing my motorcycle, because then you had it on HP and all that sort of stuff, to getting into the bike industry literally by luck.
What sort of era are we talking about, BSB wise, or how old you were at that time?
Oh, I was 21. And then we ended up doing World Superbikes and the TT, all the road racing. So they put through my HGV and ended up driving the race truck around Europe and that sort of stuff, going to all the World Superbike rounds and stuff. It was a great life. It was great at the time. Hard work. I wouldn't want to do it again, because you know you're doing 16-hour days. You know it's hard work. You know, everybody thinks that working in a race service is easy. All people see is the glamour. You know, and the bikes lining up on the grid and you know, and all that sort of stuff, and all the glamour around it. But there's a lot of hard work behind the scenes that goes on, as you guys know.
Yeah, I remember, was it Thruxton last year? I know we were talking earlier. Thruxton's a hard circuit on tyres, but I remember walking past the truck and just the kind of the tyre area and just seeing, this was on Sunday morning, and just seeing the amount of tyres that had already been used and scrapped by. But within 2 days. You know, it is extremely hard work. Yeah, really hard work. It's a great life. Don't get me wrong. And you know, if anybody wants to get into the bike world, you know, go and work in the race services. But if you're prepared to put the graft in, it's a great life. It really is. But it's just hard.
So I bet we could fill the next hour, couldn't we, with stories?
You could.
A 21-year-old Gary Hartshorne in and around the promotional.
Yeah, let's move on from that.
So you've ridden all your life?
Pretty much, yeah, from 16. I had a Simpson 50, which mum and dad bought me when I was 16. Then I had an Audi 80, passed my test on that. Audi 250 LC, 350 LC, Audi 400 DX, all the stuff you had in the, you know, sort of, mid to late 80s, all that sort of
like
stuff.
A rite of passage.
Great, and I wish I'd have kept them all, because they're worth good money now, aren't they? And you know, I've had all of them, and I've ridden all my life. Yeah, currently got a 1200 GSA 2015 model, and won't sell it. It's done 50,000 miles. I've had it since pretty much new, and it's just, we go back a long way. You know, I've done a lot of things on it. It's just, I'm sort of attached to it.
Like a family member.
It is like a family member, and I think if I ever got a new bike, I think that would stay. I don't think I'd ever sell it. I think it'd just sit in the corner, and then I'd just use it, you know, now and again. And
motorcycling is like that, though, isn't it? Once you get attached to something like that,
you do. It's a great industry. And I mean, you mentioned earlier about, you know, who's the next Gary Hartshorne going to be, and you know, going back to that racing, I think the bike industry for me is, once you're in it, it's very difficult to leave it, isn't it? Because we're all in it because we love motorcycles, you know, and that is why we're in it. We don't love motorcycles because we got a job in it. We got a job in it because we love motorcycles. And that's the way that I see it. And I think to get a job in the bike industry at a level that you probably see yourself at is probably going to be difficult. My advice is to get in anywhere. and just work your way through like I have, and like a lot of us have done, because we've all been in it a while now, haven't we? You add all our years up, it's a lot, isn't it? And I think so. If anybody wants to get in it, get in early, take any job, and just get yourself worked up.
I introduced myself to a new member of staff here this morning, and within earshot of our managing director, I was asked what I do, and he butted in. He said he's like a pig in shit.
Yeah. And it is, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm the same. I've been in 30 years now, and I still wake up every morning and can't believe I'm still doing it, and can't believe that no one's found me out yet.
But I think it's the enthusiasm and the love, isn't it? Because nothing's really too much trouble, is it? I work on my own a lot at Bridgestone. I have a little bit of help from different departments, but I do the sales, I do the marketing, I do all the press, I do lectures at colleges and all sorts of things, and at bike clubs, and on the technical side of it, all the way down through the marketing, the PR, down to the sales side of it. And, you just become, a master of all trades. And I think that's what a lot of people are in the bike industry.
How did you get from working in the BSB paddock at 21 or early 20s at Pirelli through to Bridgestone and where you are now?
End of 2003, I got headhunted by no other than Mr. Arthur McDonald, who was the sales and marketing manager at Bridgestone at the time. But he used to spend a lot of time in the paddock because Bridgestone were in the paddock for a few years. And then he headhunted me to go because in 2004, we'd signed Cal Crutchlow. Or Bridgestone had signed Cal Crutchlow to go and develop their super sport tyres. They wanted me to go and look after it and run it and everything. So they poached me from Pirelli. So I ended up there at Bridgestone. Then after that, Bridgestone then decided to get heavily involved with MotoGP. So they pulled all the resources away from national level racing. But during that 2004 season, we went from Bridgestone have always had brilliant wet weather tyres. And as soon as it rained, there was guys on like Danny Beaumont that was riding on Bridgestones at the time, pole. And that was it, But then, unfortunately, for him, the races always tended to be dry, so they never really won anything. But then in 2004, then we got real good help from the factory in Japan, and we're developing tyres, and we ended up we're getting on the podium 4th, 5th, nearly every race. So we'd gone from the back of the grid in the dry to the front of the grid, and unfortunately it sort of ended at that point, and then went heavily involved in MotoGP in 2005 onwards, and obviously the rest of that is history, and I ended up winning that championship with Casey in 2007, and so on. So that's how I got from Pirelli to Bridgestone, and then when they pulled out of national level racing, I then became technical manager at Bridgestone. The technical manager at the time left right at the right time, because I could have found myself wanting at that point. So I then took his role, and then just sort of worked my way up through the technical manager, and then being the sales rep to being, the position that I'm in today. So now I look after the UK and Ireland. I used to look after the Nordics as well, but that's gone to another region now. But so that's how I've got from A to B.
Yeah. So you've been in a really interesting time in tyre development, because we've in that time you've been doing this, we've gone from that thing where everything was about sports bikes to the market suddenly broadening out into including much more about adventure bikes and roadsters. And,
for sure.
Yeah. So, and we've seen as kind of as testers and users, we've seen the kind of the way tyres have developed has been phenomenal really the last 20 years in terms of how they perform now and the mileage you get.
Yeah, I think, a good analogy to use is when I first started doing the TT and stuff, I think the 600cc lap record was 109. It's now 130. And the production bike lap record on an 1100, bear in mind, so 100cc bigger than it is today, was something like 113, 140. It's now 130. It's the lap record, isn't it? Yeah. It's 136.3, is it? Yeah. And it's just, the other than a few bits of the circuit being a bit faster, but it's not 25 mile an hour faster, is it? And that is what it is. And it's just, and where's all that come from?
Yeah.
Tyres, everything gets better, doesn't it? Engines get faster, more powerful, suspension gets better, but equally, your rubber is still attaching you to the ground. So regardless of how fast it goes, how fast it stops, how fast it accelerates, if that tyre isn't gripping, you're not going to do 136 mile an hour.
No. Well, you see it in MotoGP is still like that, isn't it? Now, MotoGP is still a tyre which is a championship which is dominated by tyre technology.
Yeah.
If your bike works with the tyre, you're winning. If your bike doesn't,
that's the problem with one make racing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they say it levels the playing field, but in many ways it spreads it. Yeah. For those reasons. So I think it's always better when you've got, like when we were involved in it against Dunlop and Michelin, and I think the racing was a hell of a lot better then, because we were all trying to all trying to win, whereas now you don't necessarily have to try and beat your competitor because there isn't one.
Yeah.
You know, I remember in BSB when it was all open and you got Avon, you got Michelin, you got Dunlop, you got Pirelli in there, and you got Bridgestone in there. You got like 5 or 6 riders vying for a win, and you'd walk down towards the podium area with 3 caps, and probably end up not giving any away, or giving one away because you hadn't got on the podium. And then it all went one make, and then you were walking down to the podium with 3 hats, and you give them all away, because that sort of competition from the tyre perspective has gone. Yes, the riders are still competing against each other, the teams are still competing against each other, but in terms of from the tyre perspective, it gone. And I'm not, you know, I get it, I get why it's there, of course I do, you know, but my personal opinion would be to open it up. Let's all have a go.
But your focus is firmly on the road side of things these days, isn't it, as opposed to racing?
We're involved in the Endurance World Championship. So we've been heavily involved with that for a few years, and we've expanded the number of riders that we've got this year. So we've got, teams, I should say. So we've got 5 teams on Bridgestone this year, as opposed to the 3. So basically the 5 top teams are now on Bridgestone.
EWC, isn't it?
This is EWC.
But it's not one brand.
It's not one, not in the superbike class. It is. I think the Superstock's one make, but the open class, as in the superbike class, is always open. So you know, all tyre manufacturers are in that.
Interesting. One of the questions you just talked about was you know, who might be the next Gary Hartshorne.
Yeah.
But actually, I think one of the things around motorcycling at the moment is what's motorcycling going to look like in the next 30 years?
Yeah, I think that's a very important topic, I think, and you know, having seen the decline certainly in demand for tyres, you know, not just us but all brands over the last 15, 16 years, you know, I think there's the same number of motorcyclists out there, but no one's doing any miles. You know, you can argue that the last couple of years has been wet. Yes, it has, but it hasn't been that wet. You know, I think people just aren't getting out, and I think the cost of living and stuff like that. Where are we going? So where are we going in the next 30 years? If it keeps declining the way that it is, you know, when I first started, and going back to that when I was 21, 22, I think the average age was still in its 20s, and it's now mid-50s, isn't it? You know, so I'm 55 now, so it's actually gone up every year with me. So if I get to 65 and retire, and the average age is 65. You know, we need to get somehow. I think all of us have got a responsibility here. Every single, you know, manufacturer or industry business has got a duty to try and fix this. But how do we do it? And I think that's the question. I mean, maybe we just all need at some point to get in a room, you know, and thrash it out and say, you know, what we're going to do. How are we going to do this?
It feels to me like the ingredients are there because we've, you know, even I think that there's a long-term worry because, like I said, there's not necessarily a big group of young riders following the group that are going to retire in 10 years' time or stop riding in 10, 15 years' time. But that group of us, you know, I am that age. Yeah. I'm a few years older than you, but it feels like those of us in my age group, we've got the bikes, we've got the inclination, we're healthy. There's very little stopping us doing more miles other than, you know, we're not even at that age. If you know, if I remember back, Michael's generation, Michael's, you know, a good bit younger than me, and when I was his age, you're in that situation where you either ride to work and you get your miles in that way. If you're a leisure rider and you've got young kids, you know, by the time you've done the shopping, cut the grass, taken the kids to football, done all the stuff you got to do, you might have a couple of hours to ride your bike on a Sunday morning. But we, you know, my generation, you know, we've got more time. You know, I see where I live. I see blokes who are a little bit older than me, you know, are out riding their bikes on a Tuesday afternoon, a Thursday afternoon. You know, they've got that time because they're retired. We seem to have just gone out there. We've lost that. Ironically, for a world obsessed with adventure bikes, we've lost our sense of adventure somehow. You know, we do the same route and we go out, we got the same cafe and we put the bike away and then next week we do the same thing, and we've just kind of lost that thing about, I wonder what it's like over there.
Yeah, there was no shortage of bikes on offer. It's not like there's a shortage of low capacity, mid capacity, fast, slow, big, tall, all the rest of it. There's 148, I think I counted, new or updated models for this year.
Yeah, there you go. I mean,
it's mad.
And never mind all the low mileage used bikes, because we're doing less miles. The used market's full of good used bikes.
Yeah, well, I went into a dealer not long ago with my partner. She's got a licence, she's looking at riding again, which is great. But the problem is she's my age, you know, we need younger people as well. But it's great. You know, we went to have looking around to make sure see what she can sit on. And with the sales guy in there, I won't mention any names, but the sales guy, you know, he's got 3 customers all with the same bike, all at least 12 months old, and have done 1,000 miles between them.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and yeah, we were saying you look at the impact of that on the manufacturers who are selling consumables, whether it be tyres, change, brake pads,
everything,
the service department of the dealer.
Yeah.
You know, that's, you know, when we hear about dealers going under, it's not just because they're not selling bikes; it's because the service department.
Exactly, yeah, and that's where they make the money, isn't it? And you look at who's gone missing in the last 12 to 18 months. You know, some real big established dealers have gone by the wayside, haven't they?
I haven't done a lot of miles on one of my bikes because I'm lucky we have a lot of test bikes around. So but I took it was overdue a service, and I took it in, and it hadn't had a service for a couple of years. Took it in, and you forget when it came out of that service, it feels so fresh and so crisp, and everything feels so lovely again. That actually you think we're kind of crazy not using these things. You know, here's a dealer with a workshop full of experts, you know, who know exactly how to make your bike feel like new again.
Yeah.
But
I think for me, getting on your bike makes you feel like new as well.
Yeah.
And I think we sort of lose focus of that because, like you say, because everyone's time poor, just get out and ride it somewhere and just go and do something and just encourage yourself to go and do it. So I think the more you do it, it's like that, you know, it just becomes a bit of a drug then, doesn't it? The more you do it, the more you want to do it, don't you?
Yeah. The tyres are so good these days that you can ride pretty much any bike in any weather and be confident and enjoy it and not have that kind of nervous feeling that you might have had 15, 20 years ago. If you were on a bike on the wrong tyres, you know, you might have felt nervous going into a wet roundabout or whatever. Yeah. But now, you know, certainly the sports touring tyres, they're so good.
They are, yeah. I mean, if you go back to, I think it was 2011 or 12, when our BT23 came out at the time, and we sponsored the Ron Haslam Race School, and we got Leon to go and test them. So on a bog standard out of the crate CBR 1000, but I think this is before the chicane changed and became faster. He was doing sub 135s on a bog standard. I think the lap record time was only like a 29 or something. You know, it just goes to show you,
on a road
is
tyre.
that all of the tyres out there are better than we are. There's a select few guys or girls that can push them to the limit, but there's not many. They're all better than we are.
Yeah, and they've done that, and they now last longer.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, isn't it? It's not just that they grip better.
Yeah. And that's the thing when we're developing something new, we'll always have a concept, and that concept is right. Okay, so the previous tyre, what was it good at? What was attributes? What do we need to improve? What does the market say we need to improve on? And then we'll take that concept and then we'll try, you know, on the spider graph, we've got, you know, so mileage has improved a bit and wet weather grip has improved a bit more, you know, whatever it may be. But we always try and improve at least 2 or 3 areas, even if one stays the same, because even usually that's dry grip, because dry grip is so far above where most people are. You know, if we can then improve even cold weather grip, you know, for those that ride all year, like you've just said, if we can improve all of those things, then it just leaps every single year, doesn't it? And I think, you know, we've never been so lucky. I mean, you could say that 20 years ago, but I don't think we've ever been so lucky with tyre technology that we've got now. And bikes, you know, we've got all the electronics and the ABS and, you know, anti this and anti that and you know, anti whatever. And I think it's a good time to be a motorcyclist, isn't it?
Has that changed the way a company develops tyres? Now the bikes have got sophisticated traction control and slide control and those things. Does that change the design parameters of a tyre? Can they now be narrower because you don't have to worry about?
No, they can't be narrower because there's governing bodies around the world, of which the 2 main ones are the ETRTO, which is the European Time Rim Technical Organisation, and there's JATMA.
EIAO.
ETRTO. EIA, yeah. He used to have a farm, didn't he? Yeah.
Arthur McDonald.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, Arthur made all of this. Sorry, Arthur. And and then there's JATMA, which is the Japanese Automobile Tyre Manufacturers Association. So in there, so there's forklifts, push bikes, cars, bikes, vans, anything that takes really a tyre. You know, so there'll be a rim width, so like a 5.5-inch rear rim. So there'll be a nominal fitment, which is a 180, 55, 17. There'll be usually there's an oversized tyre, usually there's an undersized tyre. But with that, so there's like the tyre manufacturer, like Honda, for example, like the CBR 600, that comes with a 120 and a 180. So within that, the bike can't be over a certain weight because of the weight load on the tyre. It can't go over a certain speed because of the maximum speed of the tyre. And within that, we have to have a certain pressure to support the bike, the power and the pillion and the luggage or whatever else is that you're firing on there. So we can't go narrower, not unless these governing bodies allow us to. All of us, so all the tyre manufacturers, all of the motorcycle manufacturers have to adhere to these rules, which then leads on to, there's some of the myths that are out there on the street when they say, well, can I oversize, undersize, what can I do? So, I mean, there's things that you can do, but there's things that you can't do, because then you're outside of regulation or you're moving away from what the homologation on that particular bike was. And a good example of that is if you go from a 255/17 rear, and there's somebody who wants to, we see it a lot, especially on some of the forums, they want to drop down to a 190/50. Now you're downgrading the load index on that particular tyre. So, from an insurance perspective, when you got to declare any mods, when you've got to declare any mods, what you've actually done in that particular instance, even though you think it's better, you've actually downgraded the spec of your motorcycle.
That's really interesting.
So the pressures and the sizes and the load indexes are there for a reason. And that reason is to make sure that everybody, first and foremost, we keep everybody as safe as we can, and to make sure that if you do 150 miles an hour for a continuous, especially like on the autobahns or something like that, that all your components on the bike have to be able to do it.
If you did downgrade that size-wise and load, what are the advantages and disadvantages? Why might someone do that?
I mean, some do, certainly for track use. So the bike will turn faster, in a way, because the tyre's narrower. But if the overall diameter is smaller, then it will drop the back of the bike down, so it might not turn that fast anyway. So unless you know the actual dimensions of what you're going from and to, and what the geometry of the bike is to start with, then unless you know all of those and put the maths into it, then you're just guessing at it.
So it turns out my mate Bob down the pub might not be an expert after all.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly.
I thought it was expert at everything.
And also as well, it's not a tolerance. It's a plus or minus where we can make tyres. So I think it's plus or minus 4%. I'll have to check, but I think it's plus or minus 4%. So a good example is the ZX12. When that came out, it came out with a 250/17, and it was the first, as far as I'm aware, it's the first production bike to come out with a 200 section rear. And it was marketed, it's got a 200 section rear, but really that tyre it actually measured as a 194 millimetres. It wasn't a 200. And it was actually the same size as our 190/50/17. So all of those tyres in that 200 for that bike were all 194. Gotcha. So like I say, unless you know what you're going from and to, you could actually end up fitting a wider tyre. Or whatever, or a taller tyre, or an overall diameter, which is a smaller tyre. You could end up doing anything. You need to know the actual dimensions to get it right. Basically.
Yeah. So if you bought a used one of those now, and you saw it's got a 200 on the back, or should have a 200 on the back, and you bought a regular 200 now, that might actually be too wide.
It might be. Or because then your plus minus goes above 200 as well.
Yeah.
So not only you could go from 6 mil smaller to 6 mil wider, so that difference could be 12 mil, could be. So you don't know, unless you know that, like I say, unless you know the actual dimensions of everything you're putting on and taking off, it's a guess.
Just going back to you were talking earlier about the spidergraph and how a manufacturer develops those tyres. If you're saying we want better cold weather grip, for example, what drives that? Is that the chemistry that drives that, or is that the carcass?
All of it. I mean, there's all of it. Yeah, the chemistry is a big thing these days. The amount of natural rubber that's in a tyre now, is reducing for sure. So yeah, there's the carcass, there's the shape of the tread, as not necessarily what you see, but also the shape of the grooves. And what you can put in the grooves. In our T32, we've got what we call pulse grooves, so it slows the water down, but then it splits it, so that it then flows faster after it's gone, so that it disperses the water faster. We've all got, all the manufacturers got our little things that we think works and makes it better. So it's all of it really. It's the sidewall, it's the carcass, the different materials you use in the carcass. When we lean over, the tyre flattens out. So we've got to make sure that those grooves don't close. So you've got to put them in a certain angle. That's why a lot of tyres look very similar these days to each other, because we've all got lots of software now that tells us what works and what doesn't. Go back years and years. It would make a tyre, put some tread in it, probably cut it in, try it, and that doesn't work. Try and slightly change it again, and then you just produce it like tyre after tyre after tyre. Well, now we've got lots of software that helps us to get much closer to the end result, and sort of identifies where the heat spots are, where the tyre's being dispersing water better in this angle or that angle. It helps us get there. So we've got to make sure that the tread's right, and then when you lean, then when it goes flat, then it doesn't close the tread, because if it closes the tread, you're not going to disperse any water and stuff like that. So there's a lot of science so it's not just the chemicals within the rubber, it's the carcass, the way that it deforms, the way the tread deforms, the way the tread disperses water, the sidewall, how does that deform? It's all of it. It's not just one single thing.
I guess that my question might seem a simple one, and we could have had an hour's worth of answer, and possibly you've just covered it anyway. But I was going to talk about, you mentioned BT23 earlier on, which was 15, 14 years ago, approximately.
Yeah.
What's been the biggest development in tyre technology since? Has it been the components, the chemistry?
Yeah, I think it's probably the chemistry mostly, because, like I say, if you go back to the late noughties, early tens, then tyres, like I say, from then look very similar, and a lot of it is the silicone stuff that we use in it now, and because the amount of silica, which is an anti-abrasant, so we can use more silica to get, and going back to what you just said, so we can use softer compounds, make it better in the dry, better in the wet, without reducing the durability, because the silica, is an anti-abrasant. So yes, I would say that, and the way that the molecules, if we go back to vulcanized rubber, which was late 1800s, to what it is today, we've found processes that, because every time you go around a corner or brake or accelerate, it's breaking the rubber down and it falls apart. It's like spaghetti, if you like. So you can just pull one bit out and then pull another bit out, and then over slow period of time, it's just wearing away. So we've got processes now where we can stop that from actually happening, or slow it down. Let's say it's always going to pull the rubber off, but we can slow that down, and that's where that's all in the chemical processes and stuff like that. So it allows us then to make it, like I say, a super grippy tyre that does more mileage. I mean, I think if you compared like a sport touring tyre now to a 10-year-old sport tyre, it'd probably be a hell of a lot faster around the track now, and it would be a lot better in the wet. It'd just be a lot better all-round product.
Yeah, and as riders, you can feel it.
You can feel it, yeah.
And, simple example. I came this morning from South Coast on a Honda NC750, not the sportiest bike, not on the sportiest tyres. I think it's on Metzeler Tourance tyres, which aren't even Metzler's kind of top sports touring tyre. But that bit where you leave the M23 to join the M25, and there's that lovely right-hander that goes on there, and I'm doing 6 degrees ambient temperature. I'm sat bolt upright on this NC750, doing 70 miles an hour plus around that corner, and didn't even think, not even a concern that it's not going to grip. You just here we go.
You just do it, don't you?
Yeah.
And isn't that it just says it all, doesn't it? And pays testament to how lucky we are at this day and age. Not only the bike's so good, but all the components are so good, and all of those components allow the tyre to work in the way that we want it to as well, which is grip. Because at the end of the day, you want to go that way. The tyre wants to go that way, and the bike wants to stand up because of the gyroscopic effect. So everything's opposing each other, isn't it? And everything wants to go off in their own different directions. And just the way that you look at MotoGP and BSB and stuff like that, I mean, it's just incredible.
It's frightening the angles they get to.
It's just incredible, isn't it? Even then, when we were involved in it, and we have the really good fronts, which is a Bridgestone trait. The Bridgestone fronts are just brilliant, and the rears less so, and Michelin went the other way around, didn't they? So they make really good rears and not so good fronts. That's probably where a lot of the aeros come from.
Why is
of aero.
What is that? Do tyre companies have a sort of almost a philosophy? We always think of the bike companies. Honda has a very kind of easily defined philosophy on how they make bikes. The other manufacturers are the same. The tyre is there something that drives the tyre manufacturer in the same way?
Well, we've all got our ethos, haven't we, and what we think is right. And if we all did the same thing, then we'd all end up with the same thing. So we've all got a different way of doing things. I mean, tyres are quite similar in many ways, but then in other ways they're very, very sort of far apart with the materials that we use and the shapes that we use and the sizes there or down. All of there's loads of things in there that can create a good or a bad tyre. What you think might work probably doesn't. Depends on the bike. But going back to that one mate series again that we were talking about 10 minutes ago, it's some bikes it works on, some riders it works for, and some guys it doesn't. But when you're at that level, you can feel those differences, can't you?
I still remember, even as a kind of a mediocre road tester, I still remember that tyres had a sort of a personality, and this is going back a few years because I don't do as much testing now. But I remember, Bridgestone's always felt sporty and quick steering, and but still stable. Whereas I remember at that time, Pirelli's Metzlers felt much more stable, much more kind of confident in all conditions. Dunlop had a kind of unpredictability. Some of their tyres were very sharp steering, some were, but I remember you could get on and look at the tyres and have an idea of how a bike was going to feel.
Yeah.
And I remember we did a test once where we had two separate CBR 600s because I think one of them got crashed. And we had one of them that was on Michelin Macadams at the time, which was incredibly slow steering and stable and felt like a commuter bike. And then the second one that came was on Bridgestone, what would have been BT 56s at the time.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And it felt like a race bike.
Yeah.
And there's the same bike from Honda's press fleet, but only the tyres were different. And they had really just clear personalities.
Yeah, I think for us though, I mean, having a secure front tyre is the most important part of your pair of tyres, because if you hit the brakes heavily, you can control the rear to a degree, can't you? Or you've got more control over the rear, but over the front you've got far less control, and if that goes, you're down, aren't you? So for us, we always like to produce really good fronts, because that's the safest way to create a pair of tyres.
So grip over longevity. It depends on the tyre you're making.
Yeah, exactly.
It
depends. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you've got a lot of the AX41s, which is a knobbly, for adventure bikes, you're never going to have that front gripping the road under heavy braking because there's far less surface area touching the tarmac for a start. The knobbles are going to move around and stuff like that, and the slippage, point of it is going to be at a far earlier point than say an S23. So it depends on what it is. So we always like to try and make sure that the front is the better one of the two, let's say, because that's where you really need it. When you hit those brakes, you need that front to dig in.
Gary, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong. From a consumer perspective, I'm looking for grip and longevity, aren't I, on a tyre? That's what I want, and obviously decent price. So I just want it to be brilliant, and I don't ever want to fall off, and I want it to last forever and a day.
Yeah.
From your perspective, obviously you want to be able to serve your customers, and you need all the market research you do, but you also want to sell a lot more tyres. So do you kind of reserve that longevity?
No, we don't,
It's a bit of
because
a cynical point of view, but
I mean,
from a business,
not really, no, because there's a tyre out there for everybody. There's sports tyres, there's sport touring tyres, and most of them are interchangeable. There's a lot of guys out there on sports bikes that will fit a sport touring tyre because they want exactly that. But also what we do, we have like a 3, maybe 4 year life cycle per model. So like the S22 was out for 3 years and then it was replaced by the S23. But what we do is we always keep in the sport touring sector and the hypersport sector, we always keep 3 lines. So we still got this S21 in the lineup, which was then replaced by the S22, which was then replaced by the S23. So that's like sort of 8 years worth of development. So if you've got like an older bike and that's more suited to an S21, we wouldn't say to someone, right, fit the S23 because it's new and make more money on it, which the S21 is more suitable to that bike because the bike's older, the tyre's older. Going back to your question, so are tyres made differently because of the newer bikes? Yes, to a degree, because of all the new electronics that come out and all the new legislations that come out and stuff like noise and all that sort of stuff. So things do change. But, so just before last year, year before, the BT16, which was deleted from the range, but that's been out since 2008. BT23 was deleted end of last year. It's been out for 15 years. So if you've got a bike that's like from 2005 to 2010, it's perfectly acceptable to fit an older tyre. Absolutely, because that tyre was designed around those bikes originally. So fitting a later tyre, although acceptable, but you're going from £400 to £300 to £200 in terms of probably what you're paying outfitted, as a guideline of what you fitted. So you can get 2 pairs of those for one. So although the latest one will do more miles, yes, of course it will perform better. There's no point coming out with a new tyre if the old one's better. But we have to keep moving it on, and sometimes we find things and there's a game changer. Like I think the S22 was a bit of a game changer. I think that moved things on and made everybody else look at what they were doing. There's all the tyres out there that are game changers and make us look at what we're doing. So we're all at it. We're all trying to push those boundaries. But no, there's a price point out there for everybody. Certainly in our range, anyway.
I remember the S22 launch at Jerez.
Yeah, with the helicopters.
Yeah. Well, no, apart from that bit, I think it was lap 1 when they were cold, because I think you deliberately didn't put them on warmers.
Yeah. exactly.
straight
Don't
out
do.
of pit,
Yeah.
Areth, and it's like turn 5, and there's so much confidence. That's a fast left-hander.
Yeah.
And on a G6000, and it's
Yeah.
phenomenal. And at that point, you're thinking, wow.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you go from race tyres to road tyres and the tyres, but there's so much difference between the two. A race tyre is designed to work at 75, 80 degrees or higher Celsius. A road tyre is designed to work, from the off pretty much. Like you've just said, from the off, give it a couple of miles, then you're into it. Totally different things. And then you get, the scrubs and stuff from racing and stuff, and and then they put them on the road bikes, which are race tyres, and it's not a good idea. I mean, when middle of summer when it's hot, maybe, but it's not a good idea because they don't start working until they get to 70, 80 degrees, and then a road tyre stops working at that point, or much lower than that.
Yeah, and on the road, even if you're having a really, really good ride and you get a tyre to temperature, you've only got to get caught at 2 sets of traffic lights on the trot, and you lose that temperature.
Even a sport touring tyre will give you far more grip at 20 and 30 degrees of what it's probably going to run at on the road than any race tyre will even begin to think of. It's just false economy, it's just not a good idea.
Does that move us on nicely then to try to dispel some of the myths of the internet? And
Go on.
Because again,
Put me up, let me do it,
there's so many people who go to a track day and they've got their tyre warmers on, but I think, do they understand how tyre warmers work and how the temperature of the operating window of a tyre work?
Probably not.
Do you get a lot? What I mean is, do you see a lot of that on the forums, the internet?
Yeah, we do. Certainly with road tyres, and so I've had put my tyre warmers on. Like I just said, road tyres are designed to work up to like 40 or 50 degrees. Yes, they'll work after that, but once they get above that ceiling, then you're curing and cooking the tyre, which will then make it harder and less grippy over a period of time. So when a sort of tyre's made, it's put in an oven like cake, and then for a certain period of time, and then it comes out where we want it to be. So there's a lot of people that put tyre warmers on at 80 degrees because that's what they've had on the race tyres, which is perfectly acceptable because they're designed to be there. But with a road tyre, all you're doing, the longer it's on there for, the worse you make in the tyre. The harder the tyre becomes, the less grip you've got. Yes, you can argue that the tyre operates at, or could operate at those high temperatures when you're out on track. But the key to this is to minimising the time of which it's over the ceiling, 40 degrees, 50, whatever it is. So you've got to minimise that time. So if you are going to put warmers on, then by all means put warmers on, but put them on at 40 degrees. Don't put them on at 80 degrees. And then the same as with wets. Wets are designed to work at 5, 10 degrees. It's cold. They're not designed to work at 80 degrees. You don't even need warmers on wets. People do put them on because I think, if you're happy here, you're happy here, aren't you? Right. But that doesn't make it right. I just say if you want to use warmers, that's up to you. But keep the temperature low. Road tyres and wets, keep the temperature really low. Don't put them at slick temperature or, like your road legal treads like our R11. Don't, gladly, 80 degrees. That's what they're designed at, the race tyres.
What else do you see that makes you cringe or suck your breath in through your teeth very quickly when you're reading things on the internet? Bob down the pub, what would he... he's obviously the expert.
Mainly the...
Pressures?
Yeah. It's certainly being used on the road because there's legislation that sits around that, and that's what the tyre's designed at, tested at, distributed at, sold at. Race tyres, you've got your pressures, and race tyre pressures are just a guideline. They're still too high and too low, but there's a big parameter in what, because I'm like 20 stone in kit. I'm going to be ride a bike very differently to what you two are. The bike's going to react very different. So the pressures I would need to use are going to be very different to what, or could be very different to what you guys need. But certainly on the road, generally it's 36, 42. Stay there because that's what they're designed at. They're drum tested at. We have to drum test everything with high pressures, low pressures, and we have to make sure that the integrity of the tyre is going to keep you safe. It's not going to fall to bits. And if you keep lowering the pressure, you're compromising the integrity of the tyre, basically, at the end of the day. If you get a credit card and you keep doing this with it, it'll snap in the end. And the lower the pressure is, the more it's going to move around. And in the end, it could, I'm not saying it will, but it could. But you certainly... increasing that possibility of the carcass just going bang at some point. and you don't want to be doing that.
And it's weird, isn't it? Because on the most simple level, you think we've all ridden a load of miles. When I think of all the miles I've ridden on all the bikes, and most of the times when I've had a problem with tyres, or most of the time I've had a problem with handling, and you go back, you check the tyre pressures, if they're not 3642 on those kind of standard size tyres, you set them to that, and immediately it cures pretty much any problem you can think of.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever having tyres at the right pressures on a bike and riding around thinking this bike's not handling well, unless there's something seriously wrong with, unless something is broken or something. But that's that, you kind of it's Bob down the pub, isn't it? How many testers does Bridgestone employ? How many testers does Michelin employ?
Exactly, and the thing is, when they are employed and they are doing it, they're doing it with these set of parameters, not doing outside of it, they're doing it within it, and that's what everything's designed at.
Yeah.
The bike, the weight of the bike, the way the bike handles, the way the bike's tested, whether it's Ideada or any other, testing facility, whether it's ours in Rome or, wherever it is, they're all tested within these parameters, all of them.
Yeah.
Every single tyre manufacturer, every single bike has to, stick within these rules.
The reality is, I guess, if you're struggling to get a bike around a corner on the correct tyre pressures, you're probably better off going and getting a riding course.
No comment.
Gary, you talked about drum testing. What's that?
So drum testing is where we will put the tyre on a drum, and then we can inflate it to whatever pressure we want. And then what we do then is exert pressure on it from another drum that pushes pressure on it, and then we'll test that for a period of time. And then we'll take it off, and then we'll examine the carcass and the compound to make sure that, if you've got a tyre on your bike for 5 or 6 years, and, going back to the pressure thing where people do use underinflated tyres because they don't check them, whether it's purposely done or not. Tyres are porous, they're rubber, they leak air, naturally. So if you've not checked them for a period of time, your chances are that you're running on underinflated tyres. So we have to make sure that these discrepancies that happen is that if someone is running at 5 or 6%, even more low than what the recommended pressure is that the tyre's not going to fall to bits, basically. So it's a tyre on a wheel, a drum comes down and it exerts load onto it, and we spin it at all different pressures and all different speeds and stuff to make sure that the tyre will survive, basically.
Is that done in one place? Have you got like a central testing and manufacturing?
Yeah, we just make tyres in one place in Japan. That's it. It has been since day one till present day, and I think
When was day one in Bridgestone? I've got it written.
1931 is when the company was founded by Shigeru Ishibashi, and Ishibashi translates as Stonebridge into English. So he's obviously turned that round to make Bridgestone, make it, I guess, more westernised, if you like.
Bashi Ishi.
Yeah. So, and that's basically, I think he set off doing, I think it was rubber shoes like Crocs and stuff like that originally. Then motorcycles.
Yes, I learned that.
So the Bridgestone on 2 strokes, went with the 250s and 3 with GT 250 and 350s, something like that. And then in the late 60s, I think, or was it late 50s? Late 50s, I think, we then turned, just concentrated solely on tyres.
You mentioned that you talk about older tyres, and this is something I think, again, it links to that thing about riders not doing as many miles. So I'll just give you a personal example. I've got one of my bikes in the garage, which is my go-to bike when there aren't any test bikes. So it doesn't do a lot of miles every year. It probably does 1,000 miles a year. I put some new tyres on it in just before the pandemic. They've probably done about 5,000 miles in that time. They still look spotless. They've still got plenty of tread left. They're not squared off yet, but they are 5 years old. Should I replace them?
That's, I think the industry standard to replace them, or the manufacturer's warranty, will run out at 5 years.
Yeah.
From the dot code.
Yeah. So what you were just talking about, if they fall apart, if the carcass starts.
Yeah,
failing,
then there'll be no warranty on it.
Yeah.
So that's something that the rider in question will need to decide whether it's worth the risk or not. Chances are they'll be okay up to 9 or 10 years, depending on how they've been stored. But it's a risk that the individual themselves have to take. But we would just at 5 years just change, because they will degrade.
Yeah.
It's rubber. It will degrade over whether it's used or not. It will degrade over a period of time. How much it degrades depends, a lot of factors that you can throw in there as to how much it was. For me, change them.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because sort of
I'll do you a good deal, Steve.
because as an expat Yorkshireman, I look at them and go, they're all fine, they're great. But then the reality, actually, what you said earlier, it's an old bike, so it doesn't necessarily need the latest tyres.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at a pair of tyres that's 200 quid to replace them, actually they've had 5 years already.
Yeah.
The new ones will get 5 years. That's it's 40 quid a year. It's less than £1 a week.
It's like it's the question: is it worth not changing them?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, and it isn't really.
it's 5 years. It's they've degraded. They're not as good as they were. They'll probably be okay. Chances are they'll be perfectly okay, but that's the risk you take, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you were saying 10 minutes ago is that when you came round off the onto M20, whatever it was, and you don't even think about your tyres. And if you're riding along thinking about your tyres, then you're not in the right place, are you?
Yeah.
Using Steve's example, and let's say that that bike has been sat motionless for 3 months. But I guess some people's are over winter.
Yeah.
Would it matter to your tyres if it was on a side stand, centre stand, or?
Yeah, if you're going to leave it on any stand, inflate the pressures. On the sidewall, there's a maximum pressure that you can inflate them to.
Right.
Inflate them to that so that it stops the weight. When they're just sat in one position, it will put stress on the sidewalls and the carcass in that one place. So every now and again, just go and spin them. Even like 3 or 4 inches to go and spin them. Inflate them. Try and put them on a carpet and off the concrete floor. Mm-hmm. Ideally, paddock stands or the centre stand. Take all weight off them and get them off the floor if you can. Because obviously concrete gets really cold, doesn't it? It does, and it will have minimal effect. But at the end of going back again right to the beginning, they're the only thing that connects you to the tarmac. So look after them.
Yeah. You look after them, they look after you.
Yeah, just do what you can to look after them. Yeah, check your pressures. If it has been sat for 3 months, well, every week really, but just check your pressures. Make sure they're where they should be. Visually have a look. See if there's there's a nail or a screw or. It takes 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It takes 2 minutes just to check them.
Very important stuff.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about OE tyres as well? So manufacturers put these tyres on, and they're sometimes not the greatest, especially when when you come to replace them, you can't find like for like. Why is that? What's the deal?
The motorcycle manufacturer themselves will have a set criteria of what they want that bike to do, and then so if we then supply a standard pair of tyres and as a normal over-the-counter pair, they might not give them what they're looking for. It could be stability, it could be speed of steering. There's many things. It could be they might just focus on durability, high or low, whichever the case may be. And then we will then have to supply them. We might have something in the OE range that will fit. If not, well, then we then need to decide as a business whether it's commercially viable for us to go into it and then design a tyre to fit what they're looking for that might not be the tyre that we want to produce as an aftermarket one. And then, of course, there's the commercial cost behind it, where the manufacturer will want them as cheap as possible. So that doesn't mean we'll make them as cheap as possible. What it means is we've got to try and reduce that loss that we're going to make, because most OE probably is loss led. So if that bike then becomes really popular, the more we sell, the more we lose. So you've got to take all of these, all of these variables into consideration. But generally, it's because that's what the manufacturer will want rather than what we want as a tyre manufacturer. So then, like I say, you've got to make that decision whether you want that business or not. We call it the golden cycle. So if it's a really popular bike and you put OE on it, are you going to get that sale afterwards? When the pair's due, or the rear or whatever is due to be renewed, are you going to get that sale? That's the key to this, because then everything that you may have lost, if it is a loss led, some are, some aren't. If it is loss led, you then try and get your money back on that next sale. So if you don't get that sale.
Leading on from that, then, you must be working Bridgestone and all the other tyre manufacturers. You must be approached all the time by motorcycle manufacturers saying,
absolutely,
do you want to work on this particular model?
Yeah.
And therefore, you've got lots of part of NDAs you've presumably signed.
Exactly. Yeah, most of it is Japanese. Obviously, we do quite a bit with some of the European brands, and a little bit with Triumph as well. But yeah, so we do have to sign a lot of NDAs. We do tend to know what's coming out before everybody else for obvious reasons.
It is interesting, that OE stuff, isn't it, though? Because I show my age, but the 2 examples I remember when the first Hayabusa came out, I think that had a special Bridgestone.
Yeah,
didn't
that
it?
was BT 56s, wasn't it?
Yeah, but there was a special one for
There
the
was,
Hayabusa that had
yeah.
been, it was
Yeah.
homologated for the speed it
BT
was.
56Js
Yeah, that's right.
is what they were.
And that was, you could see a good reason for that because the nature of the bike,
Yeah.
But also I remember there was, and I won't name the bike, but there was a very prominent Japanese sports bike came out a couple of years before that came out on a tyre that wasn't regarded as being the best tyre for that, but the reason for that I remember hearing at the time was because for it to be homologated for the American market, it had to be able to do long distances at high speed in straight lines.
Yeah.
And so in order to get that homologation for that market, they had to fit a tyre which was probably not the tyre they would have chosen if they'd only been doing it in Europe.
That's it. I mean, the boost is still the same now. We then came out with a BT15 after that, and even with the latest Hayabusa, you've got to fit the approved fitment because of high speed stability.
Yeah.
Just the nature of the bike, the aerodynamics of the bike. If you haven't got high speed, the chance of doing those high speeds in the UK is slim, but there are parts of the world where you can. So we need to make sure, from a safety perspective, that it's not going to go into a big massive tank slapper at 150 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So based on that, we can only have certain tyres for it.
That might not be explained to you at any point, when you buy the bike. Certainly if you buy the bike second hand.
Yeah, and the chances of feeling those differences in general riding is slim. You're probably not going to feel it.
Yeah.
But as soon as you then do a sustained period of high-speed riding, if you did go to the Autobahn, that's when you'd know, and that's when you don't want to know, isn't it? You don't want to find out at 150 miles an hour, do you, that you've gone into a massive tank, So, there's, like I say, risk of repeating myself and going back, there's reasons, extremely valid reasons, safety reasons, why we approve and recommend certain things, and that we would try where we can to educate, to say, look, these, you need to do this really because for these reasons, and there's very valid reasons sat behind all of that.
It's a really good point. And on the second-hand market especially, I guess it's up to the buyer to do the research to find out what tyres that particular model came on originally.
Yeah.
And therefore what was sort of homologated or ideal for that particular model.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I would have never thought of until I'm sitting there right now.
But the flip side of that is that there are some bikes, and again, I won't name names, but there are some bikes which have come on the most horrendous OE tyres that you can't get rid of quickly enough, and they might not be bikes that are as critical as something like a Hayabusa. They might be a more regular bike, but though, and you look at those bikes, and when you've ridden those bikes, you think this has got to be just an economics thing. This is a cost thing between the manufacturer and the supplier, and you can't get rid of them quickly enough. So, but I don't know how you know if you buy that bike used. I don't know how you know that.
Well, I mean, you can always look on websites. You can contact us directly, and we can tell you what it is. But it usually tell you in the handbook of what the particular, whether it's a J spec, A spec, whatever, and the size. But you can buy those tyres through a deal if you want to.
Right.
But then once we've then a bike comes out, whether they've got the OE or not, we will then go through a rigorous process of approving our range on the bikes.
Yeah, I should add the tyres I was just thinking about, and specifically weren't Bridgestones.
Yeah, we've got the T33 out this year, so we've now got a full fitment guide. So the T33's, been tested and approved on all of these bikes. So we'll always test, even if we have got the OE, we'll always test the standard version, if you like. The over-the-counter version, we'll always test that as well, and hopefully approve it alongside the OE one, along with sports tyres or whatever we can approve for it. Will get tested and approved or failed, whatever the case may be.
And Bridgestone make it easy, don't it? Because you've got the simplest nomenclature to understand. It's kind of sport. S is sport, T is touring, A is adventure.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty easy to understand. And then we've got X for motocross and E for enduro. So yeah, and I don't know where the VO2 comes from for slicks, but well, there you go. People know what they are. So it's a pretty simple range, really.
T33, you say that's the new one for this year, isn't it? T for touring, as we just.
T for touring, correct. Yeah.
Okay. And what bikes would that fit?
So mainly sport touring bikes. We do them in the sizes for adventure bikes, so naked bikes, and for those that want to fit them on sports bikes, with the exception of a few. I don't think it's approved on the Hayabusa yet, but with a select few. But most of the sports bikes, you can fit them on there as well. Again, back to the question earlier. I think as a motorcyclist, you've got to be true to yourself. What are you using this bike for? Yeah. And then fit a pair of tyres that suits the answer to that question. You know, if you've got an adventure bike and you've got no plans whatsoever on going off-road, then there's no point fitting a pair of AX41 knobblies. But then if you are going to do lots of off-road, then there's no point fitting a pair of T33s. So that's it. You've got to, but when you do that, there'll always be a compromise somewhere. And you've got to be prepared to know what that compromise is, and even more so, accept it. Accept that you're not going to get, you know, on a knobbly, you're not going to get the dry weather or the wet weather performance that you are on a T33, but you will get the off-road performance, which is why you fitted them, you know, and vice versa. You know, so you've got to be, for me, this is what I try and tell everyone, you be true to yourself. What is it that you want? What are you doing? Answer that question, and then there's a tyre out there to suit whatever that answer is.
What are your most popular tyres right now?
At the moment, S22s, S23s
They're
are
so versatile.
really, really, really popular. S22. When you come out with something that was as good as the S22 and hit the market as well as it did, even though the S23 is a better tyre, trying to get people to change to the latest one is tough. Because I've got S22s, happy, don't want to change, you know. And we had that with the BTO2 years and years ago. It was just such a default fitment. You probably remember that, mate. Such a default fitment for most people. But then it all goes in stages, you know, and then then some another brand will be popular, then will be popular again, and then another brand, you know, it's like I said earlier, someone will come out with a game changer, and that's it, boom.
You must find that with a lot of the market then. Once they've got a tyre in mind, or even a manufacturer in mind, that's it. That's what they're going to stick with, regardless of what bike it is or what style of bike. That's it. They want that.
That's
tyre.
yeah.
Because they tell all their friends, and their friends are.
Honda fans, Suzuki fans, Yamaha fans, and then I've got a friend back at home who's had Suzukis, and only Suzuki since he was 16. Wow. And he's 60 now. You know, only Suzuki's. Oh, I can't ride anything else. Ooh, I'll get a rash off it and all that sort of stuff. It's the same with anything, isn't it? People only probably have an Akrapovic, or somebody will only have Bridgestone, or, you know, somebody will have an Ally, won't they? Or, you know, whatever it is. And people are very brand loyal, aren't they?
Yeah.
And particularly model loyal as well.
You know, the last couple of years we've suddenly seen this growth in small capacity or medium capacity bikes. So the Triumph 400s last year, things like the Honda GB350, the Enfield, you know, the Himalayan, the Scram. Were you ready for that? Have you got tyres for that? Or is it...
Yeah, we've got tyres for that. So all the X41s fit, the BT46s fit. So yeah, so we've got everything out there. The only tyres we don't do are trials tyres, but pretty much everything else. Or Ducati DeVille and stuff like that. But there's very, very few bikes we don't do tyres for. So yeah, we're ready for pretty much everything. Yeah, scooter all the way, with the exception of a few. Everything, yeah.
Yeah, because that small bike thing's been really interesting, isn't it?
It is, and it's, I don't know, I mean, why is that? Are we seeing a change towards people just wanting to do more adventure riding, but they don't want to do it on a GS or a 1290, because, you know, there's a big influx now of middleweight bike. I mean, were big bikes years ago, weren't they? But they're now middleweight bikes.
Yeah.
And then now we've gone down to the sub 501 category, haven't we? You know, where the sale, you look at the sales in there, you know, from last year. I mean, they're taking a big chunk of the market.
I think it's a really interesting bit of the market, because some of those sales are younger riders who are kind of on the way up. And just doing it because they haven't grown up in that sports bike world. So for them, motorcycling means something different. But equally, there's quite a lot of kind of older riders who are downsizing and, you know, and just wanting something a bit more manageable, or just something they can nip in and out of town or whatever. And so you've got very different riding abilities and experiences, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure, maybe. But it's interesting to see where it goes in the next couple of years and what the sales figures look like. I mean, in terms of market share for the category, I don't, you know, not the overall sales, although hopefully that improves. But, you know, what makes up that total? What is it? You know, because we are seeing a shift, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I think, certainly from an adventure bike point of view, I remember, you know, probably 15 years ago, they weren't even 5% of the market, and they're now 20% plus. Yeah. You know, so every fifth bike that's bought is an adventure bike.
And the other thing, which I think this is a really interesting one, because the numbers are tiny, but the kind of expectation is huge. Is the electric bike thing?
Yeah.
How does that influence the tyre development?
To my knowledge, I don't know if the product planners back at HQ in Japan are anywhere down this route. They may be and maybe not. If they are, I don't know about it. I don't know. I'm sure that there's probably something going on. I mean, I think then are EV motorcycles actually taking off?
Well, that's the question.
You know, is it worth the time and money?
I've been to presentations by 3 major manufacturers now that have said no. Basically, they when you look at the range, the cost, the performance equation, they can't meet all of those requirements and they don't
No.
expect to be able to do it in the next 10 years.
I think if it had probably hit the market like the car market did, even though that's slowed right down now, hasn't it? But at the beginning of that, and then the height that it saw, then maybe. But motorcycles as usual are sort of second or third down the line, and that's probably done us a favour.
How far in advance are your R&D guys and product planners looking? Are they looking at that? We've had the government talking about 2035, 2040 as as the sort of the changeover with combustion engine to alternative fuel.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll be looking at it certainly from a car world, and we've got EV ready tyres now for all the electric vehicles that can be used on EV. I believe, don't quote me on this, what can be used on EV and non-EV. But then the other side of it, if it's not an EV, it can't be used on an EV. It can be used on a thing. But I mean, that's out of my remit. I don't particularly get involved with that. Of course, I mean, sustainability is the buzzword these days, isn't it? And we need to be looking at things like that. So should globally, certainly in the big markets, should EV motorcycles have a date? Of course, we'll be looking at it. Of course, we have to. We'll have no choice. At the minute, are we? Like I say, I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know. It's it may be in discussion. It may already be happening, or it may have just been swept under the carpet. I really don't know.
Gary, it's probably a question I should have started with. But how many tyres do you actually sell globally a year?
I can't disclose those figures, unfortunately. But what I can tell you is certainly from the UK market, when you look at demand on the tyre business, so all brands, we're down to about 500, 600,000 now per year, whereas in the late noughties it was 1 million plus.
Wow.
So that will give you an idea of what's happening to the market at the moment. People just aren't doing the miles. Just, we did a survey at the NEC show a few years ago. Last show we did. How many bikes have you got? I mean, more questions than that, but one of them. How many bikes have you got?
Sure.
6%, 3 or more. You can only ride one at a time, can't you? It's just people aren't, like I say, if they are doing the miles, they're doing it on different machines.
Or are the tyres just lasting longer?
Or
Well, a bit of that, isn't there?
yeah, I think the tyres are lasting longer. But if you look at the figures from the MCIA, the number of miles covered isn't improving, is it?
No.
So that which indicates then that tyres, people aren't doing the miles that they used to. We need to get people out there riding somehow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know we talk about it a lot, but you think this, motorcycling is the thing that you talk to any motorcyclist, and it's the thing that enthuses them the most. People define themselves as being, I'm a motorcyclist before they'll tell you I'm a doctor, a surgeon, whatever. We define ourselves as motorcyclists. We love it. We're passionate about it, and yet we seem to be happy doing less and less.
With mine, and I'm lucky, I'm like you guys, I get to ride lots of different bikes. But with mine, I love to go on a trip where it doesn't work, so you can just relax. And there's nothing better for me than loading the bike up, getting the panniers on, loading it up, going off, I don't know, week or whatever it is, getting on a ferry. And the best feeling for me is getting the other end on the ferry, the doors open, the sunlight belts in.
Yeah.
And you're right, where we're going.
Yeah.
Right, we're in Europe, but wherever you are, right, we're off for a ride.
Yeah.
Just love it, absolutely love it.
Yeah,
I love that.
It is special, and it only happens on a bike.
You only get that feeling on a bike.
Yeah,
don't you?
when you sat in the car on a ferry, you don't feel the same.
Yeah,
Do you?
especially if you're an old guy like me and you got your flip lid and you got your GS and you sat there with you like a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And it's just great. I just absolutely love riding bikes. I love doing distance on bikes.
Yeah. But I am, the guy you described earlier at the show. I am that guy. I'm a bit extreme because there's usually at least one test bike in my garage. But there's 6 bikes in my garage at the moment, and like I say, and most of them do less than 1,000 miles
Exactly.
a year.
So if you're doing 1,000 miles a year, the tyres are probably going to do 5,000 or 6,000 miles in total. So the warranty is going to be void before you've actually worn them out, isn't it? There you go.
Yeah, and I do
my case.
I do a lot of miles, but all the miles I do are on test bikes. So so it's good in a way because somebody else is paying for the tyres, and hopefully those manufacturers are buying the tyres from, from at least from Bridgestone UK rather. But it's an interesting and I can't judge my life as anything like typical on bikes, but
no, I don't think none of us can we? Us three sat here, but. From the surveys and stuff that we've done, it is a concern that people aren't getting out riding for whatever reason that may be. Some of the reasons that you mentioned earlier, and time poor, got families and all that, and so it's probably before family, after family is where it's at, isn't it? And those in the middle.
Yeah, and the before family thing is fewer and fewer, I guess, other than the scooter guys and the delivery guys.
Yeah.
and that's a completely different market, isn't it?
Because I don't think the climate here. I mean, we've had a great start to the year because the weather's been nice, but it's been nice at the right times, which is great. So people get the bikes out, which is good. So let's hope that this weather continues and we see a bit of an increase in, not just tyres, but all consumables. If people are doing the miles, people who need pads, they need chains and all oil and services and all of these things, and it keeps the business rolling, doesn't it? Because at the minute it's just, there's nothing rolling anywhere.
No, and it is when you see how many dealers are struggling at the moment, and you think, and they're good dealers now, and they're passionate and they're enthusiastic. You don't become a motorcycle dealer to make money, do you? Generally.
Well, yeah.
That's not why you start. It's a passionate thing. Isn't
What
it?
do they say? How do you become a millionaire in the bike industry? Start with two. It'll soon be down to one, won't we? Yeah, we don't do it for that, do we? We do it because we love it, don't we?
Gary, what can you tell us, if anything, about the way tyre technology is moving over the next, or will move over the next sort of 5-10 years?
Well, that depend on legislation, I think, as well, won't it? And Euro, emissions and stuff like that. The bikes get strangled, and then they have to produce more power and it's all these things. I think are we at the end of electronic technology? Where's it going next? So it'll all depend on what comes out really from electronic wise, but and how we have to produce and make that tyre.
There's more and more stuff in the news, more about car tyres and bikes. About the
rubber particles.
The particles coming off tyres, and I think as cars get heavier, it's becoming more of an issue, isn't it?
And pollution from the rubber particles and stuff. I think it depends. It will depend on what law says, won't it, in what we have to do. I mean, I think if we did what we want to do, that would be very different to what we have to do.
I've interpreted that emissions thing as the way manufacturers are having to make their engines produce peak power, peak torque lower down the river range, and I wondered whether that would affect tyres.
Yeah.
That's how I interpreted that.
Yeah. So from a torque perspective, that's probably going down more towards the EV route, then, isn't it, with torque?
Yeah.
You've got to remember that is that like the S23, S22, whatever tyre we've got in the range, that they will work on a brand new bike, and we can also fit them to something that's from the size of the Rebel, that's something that's 25, 30 years old. So the difference between those two bikes and everything in between is quite vast, isn't it? So when you make a tow, you've got to try and make it work on everything. So it's like a one size fits all type thing, isn't it?
Yeah, there's an interesting thing with the riders as well. And again, I'm basing this on very little evidence, other than if you're a rider who's grown up knowing nothing but traction control. So if every bike you've ever ridden has got sophisticated traction control, you jump on a bike and you can just go like that. Whereas those of us who grew up on Avon's, I'll use the Avon Speedmaster as an example. Tyres with square profile cross plies that on our GT380s, and we learned very quickly that there was a very direct relationship between profile and grip and so even when I jump on a Panigale V4, I still open the throttle like I'm on a GT380 with Avon Speedmasters, because I never had that I never had that belief that this will just grip. So actually, there's a difference between a generation, and I'm sure plenty of my generation have got to grips with that, if you pardon, and do use traction control properly. But for me, it's every time I get on a bike and do use it and do experience it, it's like
Well, it's the same thing with the tyres. We do modern tyres to fit GT380s. So from the tyre that came out with to the tyre that you can fit to it today, is hugely different in terms of its performance. Grip and the way that it turns. Everything, all the variables that you see within a tyre, they're totally different. But we have to then make it to fit a modern bike as well. It's the same tyre. Unless it's an OE one, but it's the same tyre as what you can fit on an old Bonneville or Commando or whatever. It's the same thing. It's got to fit, and that's the hard part about motorcycle tyres, is that you've got to make it to fit every type of tyre, every type of bike, every type of rider, every type of weight, all different settings, globally, different weather patterns and different humidities, everything. It's a tough job.
What it is you're riding on as well. In terms of running in a new tyre, do you still need to do things like that? So, because people often will talk about the sheen, the
release
the release agent. Yeah, we recommend like sort of 100 miles, slowly increase your lean angles and slowly increase your braking pressure until you get to 100 miles. Because it's not just scrubbing the tyre in. It's been a wheel's been out of your bike. It's had a tyre taken off, a tyre fitted, put back in the bike, and again, things do go wrong within that process, or could go wrong. You know, is it seated properly? You go belting down, and then is it not quite seated? Is it going to come on? You know, it's not just scrubbing the tyre in. You've got to let it all settle down. And all the carcass itself as well. Just let it all settle down. So it's not just scrubbing the tyre in. It's making sure everything is back the way that it was before you took the wheel out, assuming it was right at that point, of course.
Yeah. Is scrubbing them in for 100 miles on the motorway less efficient than scrubbing them for 100 miles?
Yeah, of course. Like I said, you increase your lean angle gradually. So make sure that if you're increased by an inch, you've got half inch new, half inch used, and just keep increasing it, and you know, left to right until.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, so it's not about heat cycle. It's about
it's nothing to do with heat cycle.
Yeah,
it's about allowing it to bed into the wheel, making sure that all the components have been fitted back correctly.
Yeah,
everything's tight and it's not going to fall out. You know, whatever. Like I said, there's many things that could not have been tightened up or done during the whole process. So it's not just about the tyre, it's about the process of fitting a new tyre and making sure everything's okay.
I was at a tyre fitters a couple of years ago, and I remember them explaining how, again, with modern bikes, trying to put wheels back in, now there are so many sensors and bits and pieces and things. You know, there's a lot of different ways of putting a back wheel in. On
exactly, you know, and if your traction control sensor's on there, or your ABS or something, and it's not been put on properly, you give it a big hand. And you know, that's what I mean. So it's not just the tyre, it's the whole process of making sure everything's okay before you do then go and you know, ride as you normally do. And that's the thing and with tyres, and there's a lot of science and a lot of can whiz, can't whiz, should whiz behind all of that black round rubber thing, which is what we all know them as. You know, and there's a lot of science behind that and legislation and all sorts of stuff. And like I say, you know, again, as I said earlier, there's reasons why we advise certain things. And that's all I can say really at the end of this is just, you know, they're there for a reason. Please try and adhere to them.
Yeah, fantastic.
And we'll just for all the questions we think of when we turn the camera off. That we'll have part 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, actually, it's a really good point because we've got Bike Club is one place where you can come and ask your questions. So if basically I'm saying is if we've not covered your question, then get it to us on Bike Club, which is our new community forum area, a website. We've got the Facebook group. You can ask us there. Gareth, are you on there?
I am.
I think you're on the Facebook group, aren't you? That's Bennett's BikeSocial. Or, of course, here on YouTube. You're very welcome to put a comment in the section there and we'll send a bulk load of
fire them my way.
every week.
Yeah. And I'll hopefully spend a week out of a normal role and answer all of your questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gary.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.